I think something I'd like to just bring out a little bit in my capacity as a bore for UK Column, the organisation I work for, is to make the perhaps more direct connection between what we've seen this morning, which is an abhorrence and a manipulation and a sinister twist of science in order to achieve ill-gotten gains, however they may manifest. But we're here specifically to talk about the plight of farmers and the negative consequences of having a food chain that doesn't work properly, and therefore the reversal of that, and how do we get back out of it. And so the climate narrative that's been driven like a coach and horses through the brains of absolutely everybody that confronts it is informing the policy that is dictating to farmers what they may or may not do if they feel that they're in a position where they have to take a subsidy. And I've recently written an article about this because, of course, the big blow-up event in recent times has been the inheritance tax, or the change to agricultural property relief going back 1992, of course, was initially when it was scrapped. And I certainly wouldn't level a charge of naivety at anybody that didn't plan for this moment, but to assume it was going to continue in perpetuity was perhaps unlikely. Nonetheless, we are where we are, but the great attraction of that for the government is that it is a brilliant magnet for all attention. So everybody is looking at inheritance tax, which means that they are not looking at what it is that is underpinning stuff that is coming through the other door. And for people who are in the farming community and they do not understand that the manipulation of the climate narrative puts them in a very, very vulnerable position, because they might be told to convert X amount of their land to whatever it's called this week, whether it's rewilding or nature recovery or anything but food. Now, of course, the issue with that is manifold. But if you can only argue the toss by saying, well, I would rather grow food, then you're in a very, very weak position, because you're still reliant upon money from the government. But if you're not prepared to confront the ideology, or indeed you don't know what the ideology is, and what I'm getting at is that if you don't call out the climate scam for what it is, then it is very difficult for you to mount a campaign in defiance of this. And I think this is where we come in as a group, as a wider network, because some of it we will be able to do by talking to people. But as we will have all discovered over particularly the last 5 years, if you cock up your introduction to a topic with somebody, you probably put them off for life. So the messaging and the way in which this is dealt with is very, very sensitive, and to do anything more than ask tentative and probing questions can often result in total disaster. But inheritance tax, let's say, in order to demonstrate that it is a red herring, of course I'm not dismissing the fact that the consequences of it for people who do fall foul of it between now and 2031, as in if you have not had time to put your land in trust or to make provision on the 7-year basis, then you are, of course, sunk. I'm not disregarding that in any way. But Daniel Zeichner, minister within DEFRA, said that he expects to recoup from the change £500 million a year. Now, to put that in context, that is less than the National Health Service spends in one day. So when I spoke earlier about the proximity of the Agriculture Act 1947 and the National Health Service Act 1946, I was not joking. The symbiosis between destroying agriculture and destroying human health has to be understood by people in the same way that understanding the climate narrative and the fact that it drives policy and then legislation has to be understood, because without that we have very little to work with. So I think our network here is strong enough and has enough energy, has enough momentum to get that word out, but also just to go into the process of acting. And by that, I mean, we are going to hear from two people this afternoon who are all about direct interaction with the consumer. And that's the way it works. Why should farming be regarded as any different? You can think of anything else that you have with you today or that you habitually buy, you probably go directly to the person who either makes it or stocks it. You don't go to somewhere that's had endless different practices or processes to get it to that point. And I think we need to regard food in the same light. So to begin that discussion with farmers is such a critical part. Now, the other part of that, of course, in terms of motivation, for both parties, both for us, but also those farmers who are trapped by this cycle, is to consider that in shopping, let's say, easy target, but in shopping at supermarkets, not only are you degrading the environment, degrading your health, destroying people's businesses, sucking money out of the government that is yours in the first place, but also you are funding the very globalists that you say that you are dead against. So what an absurd predicament to put yourself in. And I don't mean that critically, but for anybody to really think it through and come back to realising that you are, in a way, flogging yourself is absurd. So again, as a means of explaining or beginning the conversation with farmers and whatnot, I think that's a point, to make. The other thing I would draw out, which was mentioned by Eli, was he spoke about council tax and whatnot. Now, I don't want to put anybody in a position now to sort of declare what it is you are or aren't doing. But what I would say is that this is, again, another massive point of corruption. And I would point you towards, in particular, there are others, but Chris Coverdale, who has the probitycode.com website, sets it out very clearly. I have an interview with him on the UK Column platform. And I think the specific thing, which does bear relation to land and land ownership, is that everything that is to be used for public services, for the delivery of service, for public good, comes out of something called the Consolidated Fund. Everything, which means that everything also goes into it. So if you consider that the Consolidated Fund does sponsor terrorism and terrorist activities, and indeed anything else, then I think it's a much easier decision to make with regards to the withholding of tax. So I really would encourage people to go and look at that, because it is very powerful. And also, I think in terms of mindset, to consider how powerful, Sandy was saying earlier, farmers don't realise how powerful they are. But I think the same thing could be said for all of us. We don't realise how powerful we are. And we do need to embrace that. And I don't want this to come across as mumbo-jumbo. It does actually mean something, and we are here, and we do get to take something away at the end of the day. So on that, I know that there have been a lot of requests for sort of connecting the people that are here and learning about the sorts of things that people are going to be setting up and that they are doing and whatnot. I'm just here to talk at you and shout at people and coordinate the day. So it's not really my thing. But what I would say is you will have been in touch with Kay and probably with Richard, with the others. So if you are doing stuff that you want other people to know about, may I say that you do get in touch with Kay after today, and then that information, subject to people's sort of permissions and stuff, can be circulated and promulgated. Okay, because I think that would be otherwise an opportunity missed. Now, lastly, sorry, shameless plug, but I would regard what happens in this area, food, farming, and the use of land, to be a deep state activity. It's beyond doubt that the control is not held by the government, certainly not held by us. It is held by enormous organisations. Amazon, for example, which has entered the sort of distribution of food system this year, had a turnover of £515 billion last year, which makes it only 7.5 times smaller in relation to our GDP than this country. So, okay, that is the whole of its services, but it runs Amazon Web Services, which has most of the government tech platforms and therefore control of data in its pocket. So food and the land is absolutely part of the way that we are controlled. It is therefore a deep state thing. So on that note, on the 5th of April in Cheltenham, UK Column are hosting an all-day event, which concentrates on the activities of the deep state. So if you are able to come to that would be absolutely terrific. Anyway, without further ado, what I would like to do is ask Mark Byford, the Bowlerhat Farmer, to come up and speak. And Mark, in particular, he's got a great pedigree obviously in this area in food, but he is particularly strong on the relationships between growers and people. And that is the bit that we need to correct. Why should it be grower to somebody else, money going absolutely everywhere else before it comes back down to us? So this is the relationship that we need to correct. And also he's fantastic with publicising all of this, and that is such a key part of it, the messaging. So Mark Byford, Bowlerhat Farmer, over to you.
Hello everyone. Okay, so biggest thing really for me is what qualifies me to stand here. At 5 years old, my granddad had a herd of dairy cattle, 500 head, and at 5 years old, I didn't really like this concept of this thing that they called school. So I used to wag and, Mum would think she was dropping me at the farm gate, at the school gate, and I would hesitate over the hedge and go see Grandad. And at 5 years old, Grandad decided one day that he would take health and safety to a whole new level. And he put me on the back of Daisy, the matriarch cow, and said, right, you know where the picnic field is? Yes, Grandad. He said, right, take the cow, being the only one I was sitting on, down to the field, the picnic field. I said, okay, Grandad. He said, the gate's open, the cow knows what to do. Like someone said earlier, what could go wrong? So I take off on the cow. As I look over my shoulder, I realise there's 500 other cows heading down the pathway with me. So the cow goes down the road 2 miles, which is where the picnic field was, and Grandad had said at that point, you've got to go to school. So, okay, I'll go to school. So I took the cow down the field. The cow walks in right round the field, and I thought, she's taking a long time to get into this field. And of course, then was where I kind of realised the fact that there's 500 cows have got to get in the field as well, and she got herself right back to the gate, waited for the last cow to come in, and then pushed the gate shut. Now, from my side, that was my baptism of fire with Grandad. It was like, after that, there was no stopping me or him, really. Sadly, I lost him at 16, which was a big loss. Now, he'd got out of farming at that point, and for me, I wanted to get into farming. My dad was come from an agricultural engineering background and was adamant, no matter what happened, there was no way I was going to be a farmer. That didn't work out too well. I got to 16 and realised that I could do what I want, and he couldn't stop me. So I did. I booked myself into university with some money my granddad had left me, and decided I'd take a degree in agriculture and horticulture, which was brilliant until about the second day, when I realised they actually didn't want to teach me anything that I thought I already knew, and they were wanting to go down the road with big tractors, not want to just get my hands dirty in mud and muck and play about with the cows and things. So for me, that was a very different point in agriculture, but I took it on board and got to know how the farming side worked, although it wasn't a way I wanted to work. So now at this point, I'm more on the So for me, I'm an organic grower. Now, Gloria and I have been on the farm, living on my uncle's farm, and sadly 6 weeks ago he passed, which has been a bit of a kicker because I've got the section of the farm which I run completely set up organically. We'd installed electroculture, which has been a mind-blowing for me. For someone that understands agriculture and how things grow, and this is the farming cycle that I was taught in university. So we drill, then we put nitrogen down, and then we're going to put some glyphosate down because glyphosate's brilliant. It kills everything apart from the crop, right? Then as it starts to recover, don't worry, we can put some more nitrogen on. Then we can put some more glyphosate, some more nitrogen, and then just at the point it's ready to harvest, we'll give it the biggest douse of glyphosate it's ever had, completely kill it so it'll go through the combine. Okay, that's the simplicity of farming I was taught. And for me, I'd grown up with 16 years of granddad saying it's all about nurturing the soil, it's all about putting the bio back, you've got to put the organic material in the soil, so forth. So I got a degree. Come on, at least. It took me 2 years of doing something I didn't want to do. But for me, that was necessary to go through, because after that I set up my own nursery and so forth and got into the growing side. And the growing side, I've had pigs. I love animals on farms. That for me is the bit what, farmers to a degree, I think, where we come from down in Bury St Edmunds, we grow 5 crops. Crops consist of wheat, barley, oats, sugar beet. And you could say effectively 6, because the 5th one I'd put in there is oilseed rape, something we don't really need. And, and also you're looking at maize for biofuels. Where's the food? This is the problem I have with agriculture as it stands en masse across the country, that farmers, certainly in the part of the country we come from, on the farm, it's quite comical when you look at the maths. So we can grow 4 tonne of wheat per acre, and after we've paid everything, we might earn, and I mean everything out, and this will vary farm to farm and quality of soil and so forth, we can earn up to £10 a tonne, £40 an acre, okay? I then come along and start farming on a little bit of land on my uncle's farm, and I say, we're going to do this, and we're farming a tiny little bit, and we can get thousands of pounds worth of volume of money out of it. And he's going, but how does that stack up? So I sat and went through it with him, and he's like, huh. So on the second year, he was then starting to look at what we were doing, the electroculture, and how that would fit into what we were going to do. So, as time has progressed, I've got to meet quite a few farmers. I've been out and done quite a few of these talks now. The one thing I find was the frustration from my side, coming from a farming background, is that farmers are, it's fair to say, can I have a show of farmers' hands in the room? Okay, we're quite introvert, aren't we? That's fair to say. Overall, farmers, the thought of dealing with the public is like, well, I go to the pub once a week. So at what point, and I'm going to ask a question now, so this hasn't failed me yet, so don't let me down, you lot, right? I need to get a picture of something, okay? So I'm going to ask Gloria to come up and grab a phone and just come up. If you don't want your picture taken, put your hand across in front of your face, all right? Because this is important, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this. So, okay, are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Yeah? Okay, can I have a show of hands for anyone in the room who would like to buy chemical-free food direct from a farmer? Okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. That hasn't failed me yet. Now, there's a reason for this. What we've seen, I think it's fair to say, quite an awakened audience. Is that fair to say? Yeah. Okay. What we've seen since 2020, and that was the point for me what tipped the balance, because I got introduced to the 2030 agenda, or then 2021 agenda, when I was 21. I just got my first daughter arrived, and I was like, Jesus, shit, this is a bit concerning. And I've been all the way through all of this, and any farmer in the room will back me up on this, but I always thought to myself as I was awake that there is no way you're going to stop farmers farming. That was the crucial bit for me. This whole thing falls to bits because they won't stop farmers growing food, producing food. But what you do is make it impossible for farmers to grow food. You make it impossible for farmers to be able to just do what they love. I think it's fair to say any farmers in the room, they don't do it for the money, that's for sure. They do it for a sheer passion. Now, that first bit is important. They don't do it for the money. They don't, but they should. And the 200 hands, or whatever is in this room, what's gone up, for me, is where the future of farming lies. Because what I've seen is that about 65% of farmers, in my opinion this is, this is on my own stats, all right? 65% of farmers that exist in farming at the moment won't by 2030. 65%. And do you know what I think that is? This is down to 2 things. So firstly, they're just going to get to the point they're so depressed, demoralised and pissed off with government legislation, they're just going to throw the towel in. However, here's the second side to that. And I'm seeing this all over the country. Granddad owns the farm. Dad, who's grown up with 40, 50 years on the farm, trying to farm in what they're now trying to deem as what's traditional farming, big tractors, loads of fertilisers and chemicals. The grandkids are the ones who are passionate about saving the planet. And I don't mean the nonsense of go green and all that trash. We've covered that this morning. Right? I'm talking about the ones who generally see a way of producing food without that style of farming. And that is your new farmers, right? So there's going to be two types of new farmers. And interestingly, John and I were having this conversation a little while ago. I see two types of new farmers. Firstly, you've got the farmers that are the younger, proper young farmers that are coming through the system, that they will change the way farms are farming. The second is people like you who know there's an issue with the food supply chain. Gloria and I were down in Bishop Stortford the other day, and it started in Hackney. And everywhere I go, I ask the same show of hands, right? It's never failed me. That's 1,000 people out of 1,000 people so far. And ask the question, get talking to people, and they say, well, how are you going to stop all this, Mark? So, well, I know what I'm doing, my little bit. You know, we're just going on tour. We go on tour to do 100 tour dates across the UK, and we literally Land's End to John O'Groats. I can't be at the farm anymore because of the new management structure. So I thought, well, it's a great time for me and Gloria to go and see the country, and, you know, I'm 57, I haven't really left the Shire. So thank God for sat nav, I tell you. But what we're seeing as we're going around is lots of people like yourselves who, and a lot, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't know, perhaps shouldn't say this, but the majority of the room, we're all of a certain age. Right? We're at the point where we've realised that all the shite we were buying all the way through our lives we don't really need. We've got money. We're sitting there in quite a good position of life of understanding. So we then start thinking, like I do especially, I'm 57, if I died tomorrow I wouldn't care. I've had a really good innings, I've never witnessed war, I've never witnessed hunger, I've had a really good innings. Fair for say for all of us, yeah? Okay. Then I look at my kids and grandkids and it absolutely terrifies me. Is that fair to say? Because you're all nodding away, yeah? So for me, that was the reason that I decided that I'm going to go on tour and, you know, and talk to rooms full of people. And what I'm seeing is from these rooms full of people, one big thing. Lots of people with lots of money that are starting to understand if we do not unite, we're done for. Now, I have to say this, I do not think the 2030 agenda will play out. Okay, I'm absolutely adamant about that. I used to think it would, but I'm not seeing that now, I've got to say, because of what's happening with the younger generation. And what's happening with the, can I call us the older generation? The middle-aged people in the room, like myself. Yes, that's better. The more mature, yes. Now, collectively, I'm starting to see lots of people forming community farms. And I don't really necessarily mean from this point that I think you want lots of people forming a farm, because I don't think community farms, perhaps if you've got 300 people involved, work because you've got too many attitudes, right? But I'll give you an example of what I've decided that I'm going to do from my side. I've set up a CIC. The CIC controls, you'll have seen on your seat, there's a thing called the Food Finders Hub. Food Finders Hub is going to be, once I've paid for it, it's going to be completely transferred into the ownership of the CIC. The Food Finders Hub was set up through frustration of me meeting loads of farmers that said that people weren't interested in what they did. And I find it really difficult to believe that people do not want to deal with farmers. But on the other side of that, I feel that farmers don't necessarily have the time to deal with the public. And a lot of farmers don't produce anything that you want. You know, if you're in East Anglia, unless you want, 12 tonne of sugar beet dropped off, or 5 tonne of wheat, then there isn't really a place for you to go and buy direct from farmers. That, I think, is going to change. Farmers are starting to wake up to what is happening. And I'll just give you an example here. Before we installed the electroculture side, we had our soil tested on the farm. And Uncle says to me, he says, you haven't got to worry about that. There's loads of life in the soil. We did a soil test, 5%. 5% life. So if you don't put the nitrogen on, nothing grows. Which is why they douse it 2 or 3 times a year. So for us to get rid of the nitrogen, how do we put the goodness back in the ground? And we looked at every possibility. I made every type of tea there was, from stinging nettle tea to comfrey juice, whatever it was, I put it on the ground. I put as much organic matter into the ground as I possibly could. I put as much wood chip down, which was old wood chips, so it started going back to soil. Everything possible to get the goodness and the bio back in the soil. 2 years I had to do that. Now, they'll tell you it takes, 10 years, 7 years, whatever it is. And it does take a long time to put that back in, without a doubt. But depends how you want to do it. It depends about the diversity that you want to bring into the farm. For me, I had an amazing amount of horse manure on site. I had an amazing amount of wood chip on site, and just kept bringing the goodness to the soil, We grew amazing stuff. And the electroculture side, I'll just put in here quickly about this. This was something I couldn't get my head around as an agriculturalist, And we had strawberries planted in grow bags on top of bales with a harsh wind cutting across the end of the field. And at New Year's Day, I walked up the field and we had a harsh frost. We'd had fresh snow that day on the farm, and we had strawberry plants on flower. And I couldn't get my head around that, because I'm always said, well, no, they just die off over winter and then they come back in the spring. I think it's fair to say that most of us would understand how the crop side works in the UK, that it's down to the heat in the spring, and that's the reason things start to come through. I don't think that's the case. I think it's to do with the amount of energy in the atmosphere rather than the heat, because the electroculture brings the energy in, and it was just bizarre to see things. Anyway, so we've set up the CIC. We're now in the position of putting the trustees and people in place and going to look for fundraising, and that's one of the things we're doing on the tour. The biggest thing that I want to get out of the CIC is having a mass amount of public help and support. So, for instance, I don't know, if you're good at admin, help us. If you're good at marketing, help us. If you're good at if you've got an email list that you can tell people about us about. Whatever it might be. I had a guy message me the other day, said, I've just come out of the armed forces. He said, and I've just spent the last 2 years learning about digital marketing. Now, I think I'm pretty good on digital marketing, because Gloria does a lot of mine. And I've got a friend, Pete. And I've got a friend, Pete, who looks after my YouTube channel, so I'm really good at it, right? But this guy said, I've been trained how to make videos. So he's now putting together videos for us for what we're doing. So I just send him loads of blurb, and and he puts it all together. Every room I go to, there is, if there's 100, 200 people, we all have a special thing about us. And whilst it was lovely earlier to see someone here from the House of Lords and someone here from a Member of Parliament, it's great. Now I'm going to put it in perspective. There's 2 of them and there's 200 of you. You have much more power. And the farmers, if you only realise what power you've got, absolutely unbelievable. Shall I tell you why I think the governments around the world want to get rid of farmers? One, it's the food. But I don't think that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue I see is they have more men, more weapons and bigger equipment. Just think about that. If they wanted to stop the British government, they wouldn't go to London and protest, right? That's why they want them out of the way, and that's the same worldwide. So, we've set up the food hub. The food hub concept is simple. Farmers, public, bringing them together. We set up the food hub as a trial. And this came about with me and Pete, my friend, talking. And a few days later he messaged me, he said, listen, I've put an idea of what you were talking about together, and tell me what you think. I said, oh, that's really good. I said, like, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll chuck it on social media and just put out the idea of what we're doing. 7,000 people joined in 5 weeks. There's no interest in what farmers do, I tell you. So, we then had to put hold to everything because we knew the site wasn't right. So the site's now been rebuilt. You've got a leaflet for it. The site goes live again in the next couple of weeks. So hang on because you can't join yet. So hold hard. So the first stage of the website was to do one thing. Unite farmers to the point that the public want to buy from them. Stage 2 is for the farmers to be able to put their products on there. But for me, stage 3 is the important part. And this is the most fundamental part as far as I'm concerned with you as an audience. So, first section to that is this. How many of you is there in the room? 200, okay. How many local farmers in the room? Yeah, maybe 5? Yeah? Okay. Now, one thing I know, I was talking to Paul with the hat. I can't see where Paul is. Paul, can I have your hand up, please? Paul's over there. Okay, I was talking to Paul. Paul's an organic farmer locally, right? For me, the biggest thing what's missing from the agricultural side, and is missing from all of our sides, is us working on farms. Right? And every farmer will go, I can't afford to have any staff. No, I'm talking about people wanting to grow food. People just wanting to take part, to go and volunteer their time to assist food being produced. Okay? So stage 3 is, and in my opinion the most important, is to get the people back to the farms. So if a farmer, let's say a farmer's putting a new orchard in and they've got 100 trees to plant and they need 50 people for 2 days, whatever it might be, they can quite simply tap into that just by putting it on the website, and we can send a message instantly saying this farm wants assistance. Let's take that to another extreme. John produces raw milk, okay, and John gets DEF return up. Imagine if you'd got 200 people, what at that could also turn up. Because this is where the point of this is. We collectively as an audience, countrywide, and hundreds of people in every town are starting to wake up. We have to act together. And people talk about sovereignty. Sovereignty's great, but we still have to work together. Bring all that sovereignty together to argue with these people. We have to point them out. And as Charles rightly said, call them out. Call them out on every opportunity. And I said in Bishopsthorpe the other night, I said, this is the time where everybody needs to put their big girl britches on. This is not the time to be going, oh, I can't mention that. We need to, we have to, we've got to. Classic example is during the pandemic, I posted about, isn't it interesting that we've got beautiful clear skies now and there's no chemtrails. And a friend of mine is a bank manager. He posted underneath, rah, 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 and then sent me the most horrendous message personally on Facebook and hasn't spoken to me for 4 years. However, I couldn't help but notice he didn't delete me, and the other day I noticed that he put up a picture about chemtrails. So I messaged him and I said, please see the above. The message he sent me. And he messaged back, he said, mate, why didn't you just keep banging the drum to me? I said, John, I've posted, in your opinion of the words you used, shit like this for the last 5 years. Because I don't care what people think about me. That's the bottom line. Some people might have different opinions of themselves to what I have of myself, but we have to stand together. We've got to stand up against this. The tyranny is one issue. The nonsense is another. I've got a 10-year-old, and he said to me the other day, he was talking to me about climate change. And he's very awake. He's challenged schooling about the pyramids. He's challenged them about the moon walking. Can you please come in and sort this issue out? Sure. And then read the teacher a new rights act. But he said to me, have you heard about this thing called this new green agenda? So I have, yeah. He said, it's bad, isn't it? So which bit? He said, we're all going to die. I said, oh, what, again? I said, we've been dying for the last million years, mate. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, yeah, look, trust me when they say when they tell you we need to save the planet, we don't. We need to save us. We're the only thing that's going to be endangered. The planet's going to be absolutely fine. It's going to be rocking without us lot on it, right? But as it was said earlier, they've just obliterated kids' knowledge of what they think they need to know. I made a mistake one Christmas, letting them come to stay with me, and his phone went flat. I chucked in my phone. And as you'll know, social media and YouTube and things are really good at giving you what you normally ask for. So my AI on my phone, says Mark wants to watch Richard Vobes and, and speak to these kind of people. And so, of course, when he got hold of the phone, he was like, he came back after 2 hours and he said to me, "Is that right about the moon landing?" I digress. So the food hub. And the third section to it, which I say is the most important for me, is because I use this as an example, and my cousin Mike would probably cringe if he was to see me do this speech. I've got a cousin who's got a 15-acre council farm and got given it 2 years ago, and he's on his arse. And I genuinely mean that. He's on his arse. He's done everything right to set a regenerative farm up, but hasn't got it to the point, and he will this year. He's not got to the point where he's producing food, so there's nothing to sell, right? But he's got the farm rocking. And the reason I say about this is because he's got a polytunnel frame what he put up. 72-foot long polytunnel frame. It's beautiful, shiny, all the woodwork's in place, but it's lacking one thing, and that's called a sheet of plastic. Right? Because he hasn't got the £500 to put the sheet of plastic on it. Now for me, I guarantee you there is farmers all over the country, and especially as the younger ones come in and want to do new diverse biological things which they're going to revolutionise the world with, right? I guarantee you this. All these farmers, because of IHT and all the other nonsense, are going to be on their arse and won't have the money to be able to pay for these things. Things at £500, £1,000, £2,000, which when you take it over a room full of people, is a tenner each. What I've seen is that people, as in audiences like you and I, are happy to chuck £10 at things to get things done because we understand the value of that food being produced. We understand the value of keeping that farmer going. So for me, when I talk about Cousin Mike and I use him as an example, that leads on to the third part. So as well as farmers are going to be in a position that they can advertise for needing assistance and a bundle of other things I have to say, one of the biggest things they're going to be able to do is if they've got a project they want to fund, they can put it on there and out to the public and help get the public to help fund that. And that isn't a case of you're buying into their farm, that's just, as I've found, the generosity as we've gone round is unbelievable. Walked in this morning, I don't know where the lady is, she probably won't want me to say, but I walked in this morning, the lady passed me an envelope, she said, "There's some money in there for you for what you're doing." That to me is what we're witnessing all over the country. That's not because I'm a nice guy, well, obviously it is, but let's be honest. That's because people believe in the cause. They believe we need this thing called food. It's not revolutionary, is it? To think that we might want food and water on the planet. So why are the governments so hell-bent on reducing the number of people living on the planet? If you follow the 2030 agenda, and it's fair, Sandy made point of this morning, they want to get it down from 8 billion, is it, Sandy, down to 500 million? That's a bit of a drop. Now, I've come to the conclusion, two things out of that. One, I've got plenty of food stacked away. Two, I can still run, right? So my reckoning is the people who've got the problem is the people who haven't got food storage. And there is going to be a lot of arguments over that food because the time is coming. What people haven't realised yet is how, with the government changing things, yes, we've had the inheritance tax situation. It's a bummer. But rightly, said in the room, people knew it was coming. The SFI, the one they've just removed from farmers, lots and lots of people have been, suddenly clobbered for £5,000, £10,000, £20,000 because they didn't get the paperwork in on time. Well, the end date was over there, so why have they moved it to over here? Well, they did it deliberately to make sure you didn't get the money. Because they know most farms are on the brink of packing up. They know most farmers are at that point, they've gone, I just can't deal with this anymore. So we've got to get to the point, in my opinion, that the farms, these big farms, and I've had this on loads of occasions, farmers contact me for a row, and then by the time I finish, they go, well, actually, yeah, I could spare a few acres for that. Because there's so many big farmers out there are starting to realise that their farming methods have put us in the muddle we're in. And I say the methods because over here, we have farm subsidies. Over here, we have what supermarkets want to pay farmers for food, right? And farmers were led to believe your food is worthless, so we're going to pay you to grow food, right? And over here, you've got supermarkets going, your food is worthless because that's why the government gives you subsidies. So as a result of you needing them subsidies, we're not going to give you very much for the food. And then way over there, you've got this amazing amount of audience called the general public who are getting shafted at every opportunity by the supermarkets and the government, but we'll leave them aside for a minute. So how do we best address that situation? Well, my opinion is farmers need to do without subsidies. And most of them won't want to hear that. But they're going to have to get used to it because that's what's going to happen. Now, there is things without... I spoke to a friend yesterday. She was one of the first people, because she'd got her DEFRA rep to come out to her. She's one of the first people to know about what is replacing FSI. Now, it's going to benefit small farmers more than it is big farmers. And that is something we haven't had for a long, long time, a level playing field. Small farmers were encouraged to do one thing, pack up, go home. Bob down the road, who's a big farmer, he'll buy your farm up, don't worry about that, he'll give you good money for it and you haven't got to worry. Or he'll rent it from you and you just, what we're going to do, I'll tell you what we'll do, we're just going to grow wheat or barley, sugar beet, whatever it might be. Now, different parts of the country produce different things. Where we are, the village I grew up in had 7 farms that did animals. We now haven't got one. Not one. That's a lie. One lady's got a donkey. There's no animals. Where we come from in East Anglia, all the pig farmers were bought out by big pig farmers, and they went on to a thing called bed and breakfast. For those who don't know, the pigs don't belong to the farm; they belong to some big Chinese conglomerate, and they pay the farmer to look after the pigs. Not anymore. Not in East Anglia. They're getting very, very rare now. The squeeze against meat is coming, and it's coming in real fast. The only thing that's going to stop that is us. The way I see us stopping that is by not going to supermarkets. Okay? Now, there's 2 things that are important here. One, is there anyone who's written to their local MP? Okay. Good show of hands. Okay. Can I play devil's advocate? I don't think that's the way forward. If you want to write a letter this week, right, here's my advice to you. Find your local 5 farmers and write them a letter. And just ask one question if you don't already know them, right? Hey, I'm so-and-so, I live in the village here, and I'm just wondering what you sell direct to the public. If the answer's nothing, could you at least let me know? And is there anything you could consider growing on the farm for the local general public to buy? Now, is that powerful? Yeah. Okay, if one of you does it, probably no. If you've got 100 people in the village all wrote to Tom, who's the local pig farmer, I bet you Tom would soon find a way to make sure he's got pigs on the farm that could come to you. Or whether that's growing carrots or sugar beet. Beetroot, I meant. No sugar beet. Right? That's the best way to deal with this. Farmers have got to do this thing called transition. And I don't mean, like put on a dress on a Friday night. John. I mean, the transition from the style of agriculture they're doing to what needs to happen on the farm And that's going to put a lot of farmers in the position they go, you're talking BS, Mark, because there's no way we can do that. We don't have the manpower. Involve the public. Put an acre of land on a farm down to growing really good vegetables and sell it to the local community. Imagine if every farmer gave up 1 acre across the country. Well, have we got 200,000 farmers? That's a lot of food. But that change needs to come from you guys telling the farmers what you want as consumers. See, the trouble is, over the last 50 years, what do? We drive past farms, we don't even take notice of them anymore. They're just an inconvenience. So, oh, I've heard about that. They've got them cows and they don't half muck the environment up. My sister, who grew up in the village with me, right, she said to me the other day, it's a classic example of what I'm going to deem as stupidity, right? I love my sister. She's my younger sister. She's my closest sister. And she says to me, yeah, she said, well, that cow farm along the main road, that stinks. And I just looked at her and I said, do you really just say that? I said, you grew up in a village where we had all these animals and you loved going to the farm. She's younger than me, so she doesn't remember Grandad having the farm. I said, but that's what you're up against now. And that, because of her thoughts about the green agenda and how the cows are the problem, goes down to her kids. And when they have kids, so you can see where it's going. And this is where I say, it's time to put your big girls' breeches on. Or your big boys, whichever you fancy. I've been on social media for a long time. My mum has never, ever shared anything I've put on social media. Right? Gloria will tell you this. We was there the other day and my mum was looking up the sky and she went, now she obviously watches my videos but doesn't say anything. She says to me, yes, well, she said, you can see they've been doing that again today, can't you? Drip feed the nation, guys. How many people in the room here have got a social media account of some description? Yeah? A lot of you. We all have to make a choice. People say to me, oh, you're very brave. I'll tell you about being brave, right? When we installed the electroculture, and Gloria will testify to this, we installed the electroculture and we put the main antenna up, and no sooner had it gone up, within 10 minutes we had a Black Hawk helicopter circling the farm. And I thought, oh, Jesus, how did they know? I don't know how they monitor electricity in the sky, but they knew. So, thought no more of it. A couple of days later it came back and did another circle, and I thought, okay, I'll go and challenge them. They were gone. Just before Christmas, I had a phone call with a death threat. 2 days later, I had another one. And I didn't make a big thing of it. I never even mentioned it to Gloria at the time. I was like, it's obviously just someone. Boxing Day, I got a phone call, the most bizarre phone call I've ever had in my life. And the phone call said, is that Mark Byford, the Bowlerhat Farmer? I said, oh, it's you again, is it? Because it never ever came up on my phone, apart from the ringing and the button to answer. It didn't come up saying who it was or nothing else. So I said, yeah, it's you again, is it? What do you want this time? I'm still alive. He said, sorry. He said, Mr. Byford, he said, I know you've had two phone calls recently. He said, but just know the problem's been eliminated. I weren't eliminated, but the problem seems to have been. It stopped. From my side, people say, oh, you're very brave talking about it. I don't care. I don't care how brave I need to be. I don't care what I need to do to get this message out. If I die, then I die. And I mean that sincerely, because from my side, I'm more worried about my kids and grandkids living. That to me is much more important. We have to make a decision to stand, and we have to stand together. So, on that note, if you're on social media, do whatever like it, share it, whatever you have to do. I've been blessed by the fact that when I got started doing my talks, Richard gave me loads of time on his channel to build my numbers. I was blessed by that, and other people doing the same. Now our social media is growing about 200 a day. That says to me that other people are waking up. It says to me that other people are now starting to pose to raise questions to the authorities about things I post as well. Because I don't care what I post. Sometimes Facebook don't like it either. I've not been demonetised yet on YouTube, which I know Richard sadly has. But I've had some strikes, but I don't really worry about it. That's their choice. If they've got to weaponise social media against me, that goes to show how scared they are of the truth coming out. They can't stop me, well, they probably could if they wanted to, but they can't stop me rocking up all over the country and having the opportunity to talk to a room full of people. 200 people in the room. The chances are that one of you is going to get something out of today where you go home and say to people, did you know? Did you know? Did you know? Between us, we've got the power to change things. The first thing we need to do is change ourselves. Guys, thank you.
Mark is, of course, absolutely right, and it's fantastic to hear that articulated in such a way and to give that sense of hope that there is a practical means of doing what we want to do. And I think we all need to cling to that, and we'll revisit this idea later in the day, certainly before we close out, but please do remember that, the Food Finders Hub. And I think if you're not aware of it, please make sure that you speak to Mark or to Kay or to me or somebody who's had some part in today before you go, because that is absolutely a great place to start. And if it's not the Food Finders Hub, you understand the concept and the idea, and that's really the main thing.